welcome to Arbitral Insights, a podcast series brought to you by our international arbitration practice lawyers here at Reed Smith. I'm Peter Roscher, Global Head of Reed Smith's International Arbitration Practice. I hope you enjoy the industry commentary, insights and anecdotes we share with you in the course of this series, wherever in the world you are. If you have any questions about any of the topics discussed, please do contact our speakers. And with that, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to our latest Reed Smith podcast, and I'm delighted to welcome today Lubna Shuja. Hello Lubna.
Hi.
Lubna is someone I've been really looking forward to having a podcast conversation with for a long time because she inspires me. She inspires so many people of South Asian heritage. It'll be obvious to those of you who don't already know or know of Lubna why after you've listened to this podcast. Now, let me tell you the first thing that fills me with immense pride. Next month, in October, in about 3 weeks' time, Lubna is due to become the first Asian, the first Muslim, and only the 7th female president of the Law Society of England and Wales. And that really is a big deal. She qualified as a solicitor in 1992. She's currently the sole practitioner at Legal Swan Solicitors in Birmingham, the great city of Birmingham, a firm which she set up in 2007. And she's a dispute resolution practitioner by background. She specializes currently in professional discipline and regulation and holds a number of disciplinary body roles in that regard. Lubna is also a mediator and has conducted several mediations. Prior to setting up her firm in Birmingham, Lubna worked in West Yorkshire, the great county of Yorkshire, of course, specializing in litigation and personal injury work. She really is an inspirational lady. And like I said, I'm really, really delighted to be speaking to you, Lubna. And, I'm just going to ask you to start us off, Lubna, as to why you chose law, or how did law choose you, I should say, whatever the right one is.
Hi, thank you, Gautam. Can I say, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to come and join you on this podcast. It's a real honour to be able to chat to you and to some of your listeners, hopefully. So in terms of I think actually you make a good point. I think law did choose me. I don't think I did choose law. When I was at school, law wasn't ever on my radar. It wasn't something that I'd thought about doing. It wasn't a career that I thought was suitable for somebody like me. I was from a working class background. I'd gone to comprehensive school. I didn't know any lawyers. I'd never met any lawyers. I didn't really watch legal dramas on television or anything like that. And back then, nowadays we talk about mentors all the time and, who's your mentor? Back then, we didn't have mentors. There was no such thing as mentors. In fact, there was no such thing as diversity, really. It wasn't even a word back then. I'm showing my age now. So actually, when I was at school, I was going to do an English degree. That's what I had in mind. And it's interesting because the reason why I was going to do that was I had a couple of cousins who were journalists working at the BBC. And I thought they were very glamorous. And I thought that was a great job to do, journalist at the BBC. And it's coming back to, who you see and where you think you can go because you look at what other people have done. So I actually got a place to do an English degree at university. And when I got my A-level grades, I actually did better in my A-levels than my teachers had predicted. And as a result of that, a friend of mine suggested, why don't you do law? That will probably open a lot more options for you. Have a go. Why don't you try it, see if you enjoy it? And that's exactly what I did. Managed to get myself a place onto a law degree, and managed to get a grant from my local authority. In those days, we used to be able to apply for grants which would pay for your fees and some of your maintenance. And that's where the journey began, really, for me. As soon as I started studying law, I was just fascinated by it. I loved this idea of cases and how they set what would happen and precedents. And it was just amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. So I think law did choose me.
Luckily, it did. It's this solicitor's profession's great privilege that it did choose you. But one of the things, Lubna, that you said there that I really immediately took me back, because I qualified just a year after you in '93. And you're so right. In those days, the environment was so different. We didn't have all these support networks we have now, which happily we have now. Concepts of diversity, be it gender or ethnic or other types of diversity, just weren't on the radar. And we didn't have mentors and inspirations. And luckily, now we have a much better system of mentoring, sponsorship, support, whatever you want to call it. And thank goodness we do, because it's much needed, especially for people like you and me who come from a minority. So when law chose you, which you've kindly clarified, tell us a little bit more about who your inspirations and mentors were to encourage you, and who ultimately have been with you all the way through this expedition that you've now been on, from practice to, and I'll come to your Law Society role a bit later on.
Gautam, that's a really interesting question, because I get asked this regularly. And honestly, I didn't really have any mentors. I think I've been very fortunate throughout my journey, because along the way, I have worked with incredible people who have supported me. They have encouraged me. They have, opened doors for me wherever they could. And I think it's thanks to them that I've managed to kind of get to where I am. There's no single person that I can say has been alongside me throughout my whole journey. We have support of our friends and family. We have support of our colleagues. It's with those allies that we managed to succeed and we managed to get to where we are. As you said, there were no such thing as mentors back then. I mean, a really interesting statistic that I wasn't aware of when I joined the profession, and I'm sure you probably weren't aware of it either when you came into the profession. Back in 1990, when I was starting my articles, as they were back then, now called a training contract, there were only 709 solicitors who were from a Black, Asian, or minority ethnic background. 709.
Wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
No, and I didn't know that at the time. To be quite frank with you, I didn't consciously look around and think to myself, "There's nobody that looks like me." I just got on with the job. I wanted to finish my articles. I wanted to qualify. I wanted to be a good solicitor, and I just got on with it. It wasn't something that I sat and thought, "Oh, there aren't other people around like me." I mean, now the statistics are very, very different. Now, almost 18% of the profession is from a Black, Asian, or minority ethnic background. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. It really is. And again, you said, there are much more support networks available now, which I think is wonderful. I didn't have that when I was coming into the profession. So, there were things that I struggled with when I joined, because I mean, I'm from a Muslim background. I don't drink alcohol. I hadn't gone in bars or pubs or anything like that. But as soon as I started working, all the networking, all the client hospitality, all tended to revolve around alcohol and events where alcohol was available. And I was completely out of my comfort zone. That wasn't somewhere that I felt comfortable. And actually, and this may be part of, there weren't many people that looked like me. I was trying really hard to fit in and not to stand out, because at that time you don't want to stand out. You want to conform. You want to be accepted. You want to be respected as a good solicitor, and that's what I found myself doing back then. I didn't want to talk about my culture. I didn't want to talk about my background. I didn't want to talk about my unique experiences as an Asian female Muslim. I just wanted to fit in with everybody else and not be different. Whereas now we absolutely and quite properly celebrate diversity, because those unique experiences are what make you different. They are they are your USP. They are what you bring to the party, so to speak, and they're really, really valuable.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that was very impactful, Lubna, because we've just had recently, as you know, we've just finished South Asian Heritage Month. And that's a wonderful celebration, as you know, of all aspects of South Asian heritage people. And we had a podcast series as part of that process. And I reflected, as we did the last one, about some of the things I would tell young, aspiring, up and coming lawyers from a South Asian heritage background. And I said, amongst other things, celebrate who you are, celebrate your religion, your festivals, your languages, what you do, who you are, because it's part of you. And what you said was it really hit me, because when I was, like you, I was also an article clerk, because I did articles of clerkship as well. I was the only person in my intake in a city firm who looked like me. And you do conform, you feel a need to conform because it's what's expected. And, I've been asked over the years, have you got any regrets in the course of your career? And I have said to people, not being truer to myself when I was my younger self. And so what you said was so impactful. I mean, just in terms of other hurdles and obstacles that you've had to get over. I mean, you mentioned the fact that you are female, you're Muslim. That, of course, as you rightly said, has a number of beliefs that are very important to you. In the course of your career, what have been the most paramount obstacles or hurdles that you've had to deal with to be the successful person you are today?
So I have one that will probably make you smile. It wasn't funny at the time, but I think now when I look back, it really does put a bit of a smile on my face. When I first started working, women, or particularly where I was working at the time, were not allowed to wear trousers, which is
I remember.
absolutely ridiculous when you think about it now. It's almost hilarious. Women were not allowed to wear trousers. Are you joking? But way back then, it
Yeah.
wasn't unusual. If you went to court, women did not
Mm.
wear trouser suits. And, a lot of female solicitors were in businesses, firms that did not want you to wear trousers, did not allow you to wear trousers. So that was I suppose it wasn't an issue for me because obviously what you end up doing is dressing with very, very long skirts. But when I think back to it, in a way, that was discriminating against me as a female, as a Muslim, as a Pakistani solicitor. And I was working in Bradford at the time, which is a very, very traditional community. And again, it meant I couldn't bring my authentic self to work. The bane of my life was trying to find suits with long skirts. That in itself wasn't easy because I wanted to wear a suit, I wanted to look smart. It's going back to the conforming, back to what does a solicitor look like. But I managed to persuade the firm. It took a few years, but I managed to persuade them that that really was not an appropriate rule, and they needed to move with the times, quite frankly. And they did agree to it eventually. So that was a challenge at the time. And again, you see, you have senior people in a firm that make a decision like women are not going to wear trousers in our firm. And as a newly qualified junior solicitor, you're trying to challenge that, but you're trying to do it without getting people's backs up, quite frankly. And that,
Yeah.
and that was a challenge. But we got there. We got there.
Yeah. No, I know it's interesting, Yeah, you mentioned that thing about trousers. I remember distinctly because I trained at a city firm and my boss was also the head of litigation. I won't name him. He's now retired, actually. He's still a very good friend of mine. I remember one of the associates in our group, female associates, wore trousers one day and he said, "You're wearing trousers?" And no, so that, no, honestly, I mean, I know exactly where, that story really hit a bell as well. So thankfully, having overcome these issues and you got into your practice, I mentioned at the beginning, you started out in Bradford, in West Yorkshire, and then you set up in Birmingham. So, and I also mentioned that you also conduct mediations. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about sort of those areas of practice and how you came to get into those areas of practice, and what is it about those areas of practice that have always stimulated you?
Well, litigation was always where I thought I was going to be when I was doing my articles, and that was actually with a West End firm in London. They're called Fladgates now. Back
Oh
then they were called
yes,
Fladgate Fielder, but they're called
that's right.
Fladgates now. And I remember when I was doing my articles with them, and I had a stint where I was doing litigation. I was in the litigation department. And I used to go down to court regularly, dealing with, summonses before the masters, down at the Royal Courts of Justice. And I just really, really enjoyed that kind of court atmosphere. And I knew that it was what I wanted to do. It was just, I mean, it's going to sound funny, but I think when you're a trainee, you almost think being a proper lawyer is going to court. And I shouldn't say that because it's absolutely not true at all. But I
Some
loved
people
it.
think that actually.
I mean, when I was doing my law degree, I remember we used to sit and watch. I don't know if you remember this, Gautam, but there used to be an American series that used to come on television, LA Law, which we
I
used
remember,
to
yeah,
watch.
absolutely.
And we loved it. We loved it. You'd have all these lawyers going into court and standing up and shouting, "Objection, Your Honour," and it was all very
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah,
And of course, when you qualify, you realise that real life is nothing like that. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of admin, there's a lot of real hard graft that goes into everything before you get anywhere near a courtroom. But I enjoyed that client interaction. I enjoyed going to court. I enjoyed the challenge of court hearings and trying to persuade judge of your perspective. And just that, just really enjoy doing that. And that's where I've pretty much stayed most of my career. Mediation, I think, was a natural progression because I qualified as a mediator back in 2005. And around that time, mediation was a real kind of up and coming concept. It wasn't particularly prevalent, but a lot of people were talking about it, and I felt that it fitted very nicely with litigation. It was a different way of resolving disputes, and I really, really enjoyed being a mediator. You get to hear parties' stories, and you get to hear the things that don't always come out in a witness statement or in a courtroom. And you are there to try and help them resolve their disputes. And I think essentially that's what a litigator enjoys doing. A litigator likes to help somebody work out and sort out what their problems are. And that essentially was what drove me. I mean, over the course of my career, I've done litigation. I've also done family law, which again, court work, really, really interesting. I've done contentious probate. And I've evolved into now a lot of my work is with professional regulation, as you mentioned, and I chair for a number of professional regulators. And again, it's a similar theme. It's not it is litigation because you're in courtrooms, you're dealing with conduct issues, you're hearing evidence, but it's what I enjoy doing, and I've kind of stayed with it most of my career.
fabulous, thank you. And just moving slightly, I mean, I'll return to issues about diversity a bit later on because those are obviously things we touched on and which I'd like us to follow up on. I want to maybe at this point just go back to I mentioned that next month is going to be a really big deal because you're going to become the president of the Law Society, and we all look forward to that immensely, Lubna. But tell us a little bit about how you first came to your roles in the leadership of this solicitor's profession. Sort of what led you to want to serve in those sorts of capacities? Was someone encouraging of you to do it? Did you feel I wanted to make a difference in that respect? It'd be really good to hear your story on that, please.
Throughout my kind of legal career, Gautam, I've always been quite active with sort of, I suppose, what you would call extracurricular groups. When I was doing my articles, I was actively involved at that time with, I think they were called the Trainee Solicitors Group at that time. Now they are the Junior Lawyers Network. So I was involved with them very, very early on. And then when I qualified, I got involved with my local law society. I was involved with personal injury groups like they were called the Motor Accident Solicitors Society, APIL, Association of Personal Injury Lawyers. I was involved with them. And when I set up my own practice, I became involved with the sole practitioners group as well. And I chaired that group for a year. And it was kind of a natural progression that I then got involved with the Law Society Council. And once I got involved with the council, I did a lot of work with a number of committees, the Law Society committees. I got involved with the Conduct Committee. I was chairing the Membership and Communications Committee. I'd sat on the membership board. I sit on the Law Society board now. So I've done a lot of work to lead up to where I am now. And I think I've just always had that interest in doing something outside of my 9 to 5. And I would really, really encourage others who don't do it to really consider doing it. I mean, I know sometimes there are issues around family commitments and being able to give it the time that you need, or even just work commitments. Some people work long, long hours and it's very, very difficult to fit other things in. But I think it's really important for your personal development to also get involved with other things outside of where you're working. You see new perspectives, you make new friends, you network with different people. And often, as a result of getting involved with those groups, other opportunities will open up to you that you won't get when you're just doing your normal, regular job. So that's what I would say. Open your horizons and try to get involved with a diverse range of groups and have other activities which may be kind of legal related, but not necessarily directly connected to your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you. And, tell us, because you're coming to almost the end of your year as the vice president of the Law Society, before you take up your role as president. It'd be interesting to know some of the key roles you've undertaken as vice president in the last year. And if you could, to the extent you can, of course, tell us a little bit about some of your key aims and objectives when you become the president of the Law Society.
Yeah, sure. So the role of the vice president is, you're an ambassador for the profession, but you're stepping in for the president when the president is not available, because the president's diary is absolutely chocker. And much as they'd like to be everywhere at once, it's not practical, unfortunately. So often I have stepped in as vice president to deal with a number of things. And quite often in fact, I particularly have had requests that have come directly to me because people have asked for me to be involved with a project or an event. So I've done a lot of speaking engagements. I attend local law society meetings. I attend meetings with other members where I update them on the work that the Law Society is doing on their behalf. I listen to them. I bring issues back into the Law Society so that we can act on concerns that members are raising with us. I've attended meetings with various stakeholders, and it's been a very, very busy year, actually. Even as vice president, it's been an incredibly busy year because there is always something that needs to be done. And yeah, it's a bit like this, doing podcasts like this, talking to people through podcasts, doing webinars. I've spoken at international webinars as well as national webinars. And, just generally, my role is to promote our members, support our members, and represent our members. And that's what I've been doing. In terms of when I become president, my presidential plan will be launched when I take office, which is on the 12th of October. So there'll be a lot more detail around what my plans will be for the next 12 months on that date. I can say that access to justice is a huge issue, as it always has been for the Law Society for many, 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 many years. You will be aware that there are huge areas of the country now where legal aid is not available. The courts are closing down. We've got backlogs. We've got criminal legal aid firms leaving the profession because they can't afford to carry on working. There are other issues around, the reputation of solicitors. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on that because, we have taken a bit of a battering over recent months where, there have been political issues and solicitors have been targeted to some extent, quite unfairly. And I'll also be doing work around diversity. I couldn't not do diversity. I'm going to be the first Asian. I'm going to be the first Muslim. I'm going to be the seventh woman. The Law Society has been around almost 200 years. It was established in 1825. So we've kind of made a lot of progress in those 200 years. We're getting to a place where I never dreamed we would be, where we've got, an Asian woman leading the profession, I should say. And one of the issues that I will be looking at is the issue of diversity at senior partnership level within firms. We've got good levels of diversity coming into the profession now, but we're not seeing that progress to the senior levels of the profession. And equally, within the judiciary, we're not seeing the diversity that we would like to see at more senior levels of the judiciary. So I really want to see what we can do to try and move that dial and progress that agenda further.
Fabulous. And I can tell you, Lubna, you'll have many, many people, including me, at the very front of the queue to assist you, encourage you, to do anything we can to support you in all your objectives.
That's absolutely fantastic, Gautam, because honestly, we can only achieve when we all work together. And it is about teamwork. One person cannot bring around the changes that we need to see. It has to be a collective effort right across the profession, across the judiciary. We all need to work together to try and find the ways of breaking down whatever barriers are there. We can only do that together. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And I hope many of your listeners will feel the same as well.
Oh, I know they will. And, we're all going to be there cheering for you. And, on that thing, I'm going to be just going to focus on one thing because, I know we've spoken about a number of issues about diversity and the importance of diversity and inclusion and equality. To me, it's just iconic to me that you're going to be the first Muslim, the first female Muslim leader of the solicitor's profession as president. And that really speaks a lot. And, it has a big impact. I know that you're a very humble person by all estimation. You are a very humble person. But what does it mean to you, if you wouldn't mind being a little bit indulgent to my question, to express what you hope the impact will be to law students, trainees, young associates, young partners, senior partners of an ethnic background, particularly a South Asian heritage background, to see you achieve the role of President of Law Society?
What can I say? No pressure. Obviously, I have spoken to many, many people, and many people have spoken to me already during the course of the period that I've been Deputy Vice President and Vice President. And the overarching theme that keeps coming across is representation matters. If I can see it, I can be it. And I couldn't see it, and I didn't actually think I could be it, but with the support of my colleagues, I have managed to get to where I am. And I think that says a lot about our profession generally. Our profession wants to see change, and they are encouraging change. And I think that's a fantastic thing. I am a solicitor first. I've been a solicitor for 30 years. I've worked really, really hard over those 30 years, and I really hope that I'm going to be a role model, not only for South Asian solicitors, but for all solicitors. It's great that I'm in this role, and I hope I am inspiring others. I hope they do look at me and think, actually, we can get on in this profession, we can achieve in this profession, as long as you've got the ability, as long as you've got the skills, and as long as, you do have to work hard. I can't say it's just landed in my lap. I've worked incredibly hard to get to where I am. But, other people, if they can see that, and if I can help just some of those to think more positively about their future and about their future career prospects, I've done something positive. And obviously I'll try and do much more than that when I get into the position of president in October. I will be working incredibly hard to be a good president for all of our profession, whatever their background, whatever their concerns, whatever their issues. And the fact that I'm an Asian woman, I hope, will tell everybody that it doesn't matter what your background is. You can do a good job, whoever you are, wherever you're from. You need to be given those opportunities, and you need to be given that chance to show that you can achieve.
That's such a wonderful way to. It's just a wonder. I just think that's just a wonderful way to look at it. I just want to tell you that I think, I'm going to move to the sort of more now the sort of the last bit of the podcast, because I honestly can't think how I could even top that or ask you a supplemental. You absolutely nailed every single aspect of that one. And just so our listeners know, all of this is unscripted. So this discussion with Lubna is completely unscripted, as all good podcasts, I believe, should be. So, no, that was wonderful. Thank you very much, Lubna. So let me now move into, we always end Lubna these podcasts with a more sort of light-hearted section, which is very popular, I must say, with our listeners, because it gives a bit of a window into the lives of the podcast guests. And previous podcast guests have included former Supreme Court judges from this country, from other countries, judges and senior practitioners from all sorts of countries. And I also find it personally very interesting. So I'm going to ask you three things, Lubna, to round off this podcast. So let's start with music. What's your favorite sort of music? Have you got any favorite bands or singers, or in favorite albums that you particularly enjoy putting on?
I'm not sure whether I should admit this. Actually, Gareth. I mean,
go on.
The spot, but I'm going to tell you that I'm a huge George Michael fan.
Oh, me too. I love George Michael.
Always have been, always
from the Wham
will
days.
be.
Yeah.
Every single, from the Wham days right through, George Michael all the way. And I mean, generally 80s. I mean, I love the 80s because that was when I was, a lot younger, and you associate it with your younger days. When you listen to it, you feel like you're back in your 20s again. So, but no, George Michael would be top of the list for my favorite music.
I love it. He's one of my absolute favorites. I mean, I've got so much of his stuff. He was one of the best singer-songwriters of all time.
Absolutely.
And he also produced a lot of his own music. He played some instruments too. Just a wonderfully talented man, taken far too soon. I mean, is there one particular George Michael or Wham song that you particularly love?
Honestly,
it's hard to choose.
So many. I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I just felt he was an incredible songwriter, and he talked to your heart. He talks to your heart. You listen to him. I mean, obviously, you've got the fluffy stuff, which I love as well. The kind of the dance stuff, which is great. But a lot of his very serious music was just so poignant, and I just love listening to the lyrics.
It's so true, and I'm going to take an indulgence here for a few seconds. I recently played Make It Big, the first album, and there was one song on there called Nothing Looks the Same in the Light, which I hadn't heard for a long time, and it dawned on me as I was playing it and reading the lyrics off the record that George Michael wrote that when he was 18 years old. And you just think, wow, when I was 18, I could barely write my own name. And he's writing songs that profound. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Well, that's another thing you and I have in common.
We'll save that for another discussion.
We will.
We could probably talk about that for another hour, actually.
Yeah. I know we could. I know we could, definitely. So then tell us a little bit about your favorite films. Do you have any favorite films?
I mean, I love watching movies. It's kind of my relaxed time, and I like world cinema. I like watching world cinema. And there's one film in particular. I don't know if you know it. It's quite an old film now. It's not a new film. Called Cinema Paradiso.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Black and white. Yeah.
Well, yeah. That would be towards the top of my list. I can't remember. I don't think it is all black and white. Some of it's
Oh,
black
isn't
and
it?
white.
I think, yeah.
But anyway, that is just a beautiful, beautiful film, and it is coming back to the nostalgia. We love a bit of nostalgia, and I think that will probably be somewhere near the top of my list. Although I do like things like Gladiator as well. That's a great movie because nice big epic film. There's so many. It's difficult to choose.
I know it is very tough. No. Well, thank you for sharing that. And then the last thing. This is my last question. I promise you. I'm not going to cross-examine you any further, Lubna. But now with travel. Now I know thankfully we're now all coming out of this dreadful pandemic that we've all been subject to, and things are getting back to a lot more normality. Have you got any favorite places you just love traveling to, or that you've not traveled to for a bit and you look forward to going to again soon?
I mean, I think it depends on what your mood is. If you want to go to the beach, you can't beat the Maldives. It's simple. Maldives is just amazing. And that's somewhere I'd love to go back to. But in terms of city, New York. It's got to be New York. Can't beat the buzz of New York. I think it's because it's very similar to London, actually.
Yeah.
And there's just so much to do, so much variety, so much vibrancy, so much diversity, so much to experience. I'd probably say New York would be a place I'd love to go back to.
Fabulous. Well, Lubna, thank you very, very much for being such a wonderful podcast guest. It's been an absolute privilege to speak to you. I've been wanting to have a podcast discussion with you for a long, long time, and I'm incredibly grateful that you've allowed me to do that. And I know that our listeners, of whom there'll be many of this podcast, will absolutely love hearing what you've had to say. I found it inspirational, uplifting, enjoyable, funny, all sorts of things, and on all levels. But it's just been wonderful. So thank you very, very much. And last and definitely not least, I wish you all the very best for a very successful and impactful year as a president of the Law Society, starting on the 12th of October, 2022. So thank you very much indeed, Lubna.
Thank you ever so much for asking me, and it's been lovely chatting to you. Thank you.
Arbitral Insights is a Reed Smith production. Our producer is Ali McCardle. For more information about Reed Smith's global international arbitration practice, email arbitralinsights@reedsmith.com. To learn about the Reed Smith Arbitration Pricing Calculator, a first-of-its-kind mobile app that forecasts the costs of arbitration around the world, search Arbitration Pricing Calculator on reedsmith.com or download for free through the Apple and Google Play app stores. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, reedsmith.com, and our social media accounts at Reedsmith LLP on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. This podcast is provided for educational purposes. It does not constitute legal advice and is not intended to establish an attorney-client relationship, nor is it intended to suggest or establish standards of care applicable to particular lawyers in any given situation. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Any views, opinions, or comments made by any external guest speaker are not to be attributed to Reed Smith LLP or its individual lawyers. All rights reserved.